to our next session, which is our virtual reality and user experiences driving the future of Gen Z customers. There may be an accurate representation of some members of Gen Z. All this way, Gen Z is becoming an increasingly important part of the workforce as well, as Gen Zers are becoming increasingly powerful in terms of purchasing power and disposable income. Gen Z's consumers' characteristics tend to reflect their pragmatic approach to money and education as well. So other key influences are their affinity for technology, their belief in social causes, and strong individualistic streak as well. Well, to discuss on this, we have our esteemed panel of experts. Would like to invite on stage, firstly, Mr. Yash Pariani, founder and CEO, Indian Gaming League. May I have the honor of inviting you on stage? We have Ms. Anvesha Poswalia, digital and e-commerce lead, home care, Unilever. All right, she's not there. We have Deepa Krishnan, director, marketing, category, loyalty, and digital Starbucks. Please welcome. We have Aruna Daryanani, director and business head, Amazon Mini TV. Please welcome. Along with them, we have Mr. Akshay Mathur, Chief Revenue Officer, Tyroo. May I request you all to please put your hands together for all our speakers are coming on stage. And we have a session chair, of course, Ms. Parul Menghani, founder and CEO, Good Ants Media.
Thank you, Namita, for the introduction.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking time out for this session. We were planning to talk a lot about ourselves, but then we decided, let's just skip the intros because we have less time. But I'd like to ask the audience, I think we've done a small round earlier, how many Gen Zs in the room, except for Mr. Vanwari? Really? Wow, I just see like 2 hands, 3, and you mentioned you are 2, like 5? Okay, we need to go somewhere else to find the TG. But not to worry, this is going to be a fun session. As you can see, it's a fantastic panel. We have everyone from FMCG to gaming to OTT and ad tech. Please feel free to ask questions. I mean, we'll open it up. We'll try and keep it short but informative, yeah? So I'll start quickly with Yash. So Yash, gaming and VR, we can see is a natural fit, right? And we were talking backstage about, you know, how gaming is not a very large part, sorry, VR is not a very large part at this point of time as part of the plans, but I think I'd leave it to you to explain to me, you know, how do you see this as an opportunity, right, from a VR perspective for both the developers and the gamers?
So what we've seen with gaming, especially when it comes to virtual reality, right now when it comes from the gamer perspective, the adoption rate has still not reached the masses where publishers probably would have hoped to achieve by now. Probably the reason for that is when it comes to the pricing, one of the biggest factors of why virtual reality hasn't been adopted by a lot of the users is the price tag, the portability, logistics, and of course the quality of the games that are currently on it. Another reason why we've not seen people engage for a really long time using virtual reality is even the processor, the frames per second in each device. These are all things that have to keep on improving over time. Right now, we've seen a lot of people after maybe half an hour of engaging on a VR headset, they start to feel nauseous. And that's probably to do with the FPS limitations that a lot of these headsets have at the moment. So we've seen that with each iteration of each product, for example, the Quest 2 or the Quest Pro, these are improving, but at the same time, the cost is also still to come down. So until the cost really does significantly drive down, we won't see mass adoption from the gamer side. And the other thing that's driving growth is also the games that are coming with it. So we have seen a high quality number of games already in the VR segment, but there's still very few games. There's probably about a handful of 10 or 15 games which are actively engaged with. The rest of the games still have a lot of development. I think once we have more mass tier titles like a Grand Theft Auto coming into a virtual reality, that's when we would see mass adoption.
Sure. I think my next question is to Deepa. So FMCG brands, and especially like Starbucks, focuses a lot and thrives on customer experience. It'll be very interesting to know how would you incorporate virtual reality into a coffee shop experience, and how do you think it's going to benefit with the loyalty of your customers?
Sure. First of all, I'd just like to say on a lighter note that this room seems to have only 2 Gen Z. The rest of the Gen Z are probably having a lot of fun and living their life and creating experiences while we are sitting and talking about them, right? So, and that is the reality of the world. The audience that we are most interested in is kind of very busy creating their experiences. Let's look at some numbers. So India's 27% of India's population, which is a little more than 400 million, is Gen Z. The other interesting statistic is that if you look at it from a global perspective, there are only 3 more countries which have a percentage of their population higher than India. There's Pakistan, I think there's Nigeria, and 1 more, which means that we have the largest Gen Z pool in the world, right? What happens when a brand, and for a brand like Starbucks, and I had a couple of my colleagues coming and almost complaining to me, saying that, our kids are obsessed with Starbucks, which is really good for us. I think, your question in a sense hit the nail on the head. As a brand, we are all about customization. We'll make the coffee for you the way you want it, right? There is a joke in Starbucks that there are more than 100,000 lattes, because the way you would like your latte would be very different from, let's say, the way Akshay would like it, with customization. So we go to that extent to customize. And of course, the whole ritual of writing your name on the cup, calling it out loud, etc. I think 2 things that Starbucks has done globally. One is used virtual reality and Web 3.0 overall to create metaverse experiences, and you could go on to personalize it. And also creating NFTs, which consumers can then use as part of the loyalty program. So you really personalize it to that level. In India, we have a loyalty base of more than 2.6 million. So when we launch this in India, which we'll eventually do, you will be able to mine NFTs, which a person will be able to use to redeem beverages or food and really personalize it the way you want. But there are so many use cases, right? You could use AR and VR for personalized coffee experiences, for Americano lover versus a cappuccino and a latte lover. And I think the sweet spot, like I always say, is humanizing the digital, because you will otherwise just get drowned in this whole conversation about Web 3.0. As a brand, we are very clear it's going to be about connection and personalization.
Very well said. Akshay, this is for you. So as a leader in ad tech, how do you see virtual reality influencing the advertising landscape?
Yeah, I think VR or AR, if you may call it, right? Ad tech has adopted it way back, right? And like what Deepa said is that it's a large audience pool. It is an audience which the marketer is trying to reach out to, right? Whether it's Starbucks or Nestle, etc., right? So from an ad tech perspective, we are seeing a lot of adoption for platforms, and there are platforms available like, Snapchat is there, or Meta, etc. They've already adopted AR as a platform within the platform, and we're seeing a lot of interaction, engagement happening of these users. Gen Zs are people who are looking for genuine connections with their own selves or with brands, etc. And that engagement they do see. And if brands are smart enough to use the technology, they can get their attention and engagement to a next level. We see that happening on Snap, for example. Snap as a platform, and we run large campaigns with marketers. We plan and strategize that how do we get these audience pools and have them engage with the brand. And there have been phenomenal case studies that we've seen where these audience sets are spending almost 20 to 30 seconds on a branded content, which is big for an ad tech perspective. And why I say that is because this is a mobile first generation. This is a generation which has extremely limited time spans, or attention spans rather, right? Within 3 seconds you do your communication or you're out of it. You see most of the UXs, user experience of these platforms, where they're just endlessly scrolling or they're just moving on to the next piece of content. And your advertising comes there. And can you get that attention in the 3 seconds that they have before they flip you out, right? So AR, for example, is one of those where they are sharing, they are liking, they're sharing that piece of content where they're using to their friends, etc., and getting that attention.
Sure. This one's going to be interesting. I'm a bit biased because I'm a content person, so I'm glad Aruna is here to bring that bit on the panel. Aruna, how do you see virtual reality revolutionizing the way content is consumed? It'd be great to hear an example or anything that you think Mini TV is doing specifically in that space.
Thanks. It is an interesting question because when you look at content, right, even within the same demographic of customers, choices vary at an individual level. And hence personalizing, I look at VR as a personalization at scale. We've, of course, use machine learning models, etc., to do that because you want to keep showing things that are relevant to you. But VR just takes it, up that notch. It is very hard to do it in content, and hence the number of examples are on your fingertips, right? Bandersnatch did that on Netflix. Then you have Ranveer versus the Wild that did it, to a very nice way extent, where you could decide which journey of Ranveer you wanted to follow and what would that outcome be. And this involves a significant level of production, costs that have to be incurred because, the show has to be shot in a certain way where you can take the storylines in a direction that you want to. So that's why the examples are far and few. So the production needs to catch up first to really make it happen at scale. But I do look at this as an opportunity, although we haven't explored it to a large extent outside of marketing. I do look at this as an opportunity where really involving the customer as part of the content is essential for your stickiness to happen, or even, taking the customer along the journey that you are going through. If we can do that, that would just be a massive way. I think it's not just about the content, but even we are an award service, so celebrating the brand in the process in that storyline would definitely make it phenomenal. These are some early thinking days, I would say, for the content industry to really look at it. And I'm hopeful, we'll be able to crack that formula to move forward.
I'm sure, yeah.
Though, the biggest, one of the biggest successes in content and would be the Barbie movie, right? Yeah. Where they took out that huge AR in Dubai and Burj Khalifa, I guess it went viral. And how did they manipulate that into a success story? I think that was a good execution, I would say, within the content space.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. From a marketing perspective, we definitely have many, examples to give. But content, yes, is a challenge. I was really hoping, I was actually excited to hear what is Aruna going to say about this, because it's challenging. It is challenging. You have to literally plan very differently for the content production, for the experience to be right. My next question is that, in your own capacity for your own brands, you would have done some sort of, campaigns or executed or incorporated VR, AR, or MR into, some marketing experience. What are the trends that you see, or the genres, any specific kind of experiences that you see that excites Gen Z? And you can, each one of you can probably speak about this. Yash, you can start. Or maybe you start, Akshay.
No, so I think that the trend that we see, at least in AR and these platforms like Snap, etc., is the gamified lenses or gamified filters, right? Or the second thing that we see is the try-ons. These are two things which are in the ad tech space becoming very popular with the Gen Zs. The adoption is better. For example, in the gamified version, we had I remember a campaign for Perfetti, Chupa Chup, right? That campaign, where we gamified the whole thing, and the user could open his mouth and catch as many candies that they could, and there was a scoreboard, and they could play it along with their friend, right, or the people that they know, and share their scores and see who scores better. Now, it's in simple execution. It is a lens-based. They can see themselves, catch those candies. Very gamified stuff, but it had phenomenal share rate, for example. And I can share this because it's a open case study where they got almost 1.7% people sharing that with their friends. So there was earned media also that came along with the paid media that they did, right? So that was like a good execution. Try-ons is catching on. These are basically lenses or AR execution where you can see the product on your own. So for example, if it's a watch or a smartwatch, you can see exactly how it will look in your hand. And for those products where, it's very important on how they look, like clothes or watches or shoes or maybe specs, it works beautifully well. So, I think those are
I think
some
it's
trends.
getting common now. Obviously, early on, I think Lenskart had done it. We were talking about that. Lenskart,
Yeah.
Myntra. A lot of brands are, kind of giving you that experience where you could try a product, doesn't matter which category. And I think it just makes you more confident before you buy because it just gives you some sense of what it's going to look like on you. So I think this is a very, should be something that everyone should pick up.
It brings consideration. So if you see the mechanics and the commercial part of it, it definitely brings consideration into play when, and then of course, future purchase and stuff like that.
But personalization is very, very important, specifically for Gen Z. I think the folks that are not in the room really prefer personalization and focus, right? So, yeah, I think as long as we have that, it is going to work as a campaign. Yash, do you have something to say?
So we've had a couple of campaigns with virtual reality. What we've seen is people are still very curious about this technology. I think it's still, a lot of people want to experience it more before they go out and buy it. So what we've seen is the most effective way right now is to let users actually experiment, use it, feel the product, and then they'll take their decision once there's enough incentives for them to buy it. And incentives for us would be maybe if there is a tournament around a particular game, that could be an incentive for an end user to complete the transaction of buying a
But
VR
what are the exciting trends that you see, like within gaming for an AR or a VR experience?
So from IGL's perspective, we have a mostly mobile user base. I would say in India especially, mobile would be the predominant platform and choice of a gamer to go and play a game, followed by probably PC, then console, and then the smallest segment of that would be virtual reality. So I think the trends that we've seen is that there is a growing interest, but for it to reach mass adoption, it'll still take, getting a lower entry barrier priced device. And along with that, having more wide variety of games and maybe third parties that are actively enhancing and creating tournaments that allow users to monetize or earn revenue from actually playing a particular VR game.
Interesting. Deepa?
I think the way I look at it is the trends that are relevant for Gen Z are going to be relevant for them for VR and AR as well. So I think 4 big trends that we are seeing. One is, unlike millennials for whom everything is about experience, for Gen Z it is about creation. Because you're so comfortable in this space, so you have to give them a platform where they can be the creators and not where it's not like a linear marketing mission, it's a circular marketing mission where you're giving them a platform, allowing them to see, make your platform better, create content, and then you use that as well. So the user becomes the influencer, and that's why it's circular. That's the first thing. Second, I think there is this huge thing about conscious consumption. It's one of the few generations which kind of puts their money where their heart is with respect to sustainability, community, etc. And I think it would be good for AR, VR to really adopt that as well, where you're in a sense being able to make a mark and give back while you're in the process. I think the third, of course, is personalization. I mean, when they are, Gen Z is going to be very, very critical of something which is made for all versus made for one. And that goes back to the first point of a circular economy for them, where they want to be made, to feel special, where they're creating stuff and you're therefore taking the pains to create stuff for them. And I think the last one is what, Yash also touched upon. I think demystifying AR, VR by making it mobile first, because Gen Z is mobile first. So the more you kind of limit them with technology or cost or logistics, which is going to inhibit the experience, you're going to limit the whole experience, I think. So those would be the four big trends to watch out for.
Very, very interesting. I think one of the points that you mentioned, actually started with it, which is very critical. And I've worked on short format content, and I literally learned how this works is to create more.
Yeah.
To basically give, the users an opportunity to generate more content. And it's not that we have to create content and feed them. It's like we give them the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that really, really works because they love to take charge. And they also very aspirational. So when they get into the zone of like, hey, we're going to be in the limelight, they also like that. So we used to do a lot of this create to create more, and it has worked fabulously, even in pure content play, like no brands involved. So very, very interesting. Aruna, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are one of those platforms which is, we keep saying the buzzword content to commerce. We are content to commerce because we are tightly integrated with the Amazon ecosystem. I think, what we mentioned over here in terms of making it super easy and not like force-fitted is super important. A lot of times brands genuinely look at it as a buzzword or an ability to win awards, but not genuinely how it helps the brand. I think that aspect needs to be carefully thought through. Otherwise, using technology for the sake of technology never bears any fruit for the brand.
Absolutely. I think some of you have shared some examples of some successful campaigns. I still would love to hear any of the campaigns where you used VR to engage with the Gen Z consumer. It could be something you've implemented or you'd love to talk about.
Okay, so I'll keep it very brief. So when we launched our first Reserve store in India, Reserve is really a high-end coffee format. And if you go to any Starbucks in the country, you'll find that there is art in the store which is very different. No two stores will have the same art because it's about the community and taking inspiration from where we are. So whole Reserve store came live with that art which had like an AR filter where you could learn about the artist and the art was in motion telling a story. It was not only for Gen Z, it was Gen Z forward, but it was to really give everybody an immersive experience. And the other thing is the story behind coffee, right? Because being the leaders in coffee, it's also our job to, in a sense, demystify coffee and not make it very complex. You were talking about how you have your coffee, maybe 0.5% of Indian consumers have it like that. But the rest of them want to know the whole origin story and all of that. So we use AR, VR for that. And I think that's been very successful because it's brought the consumer, it's almost about taking the consumer into the farms of Coorg or Brazil or Ethiopia and really telling them the story and goes back again to conscious consumption.
Correct. And I think it adds more value because if it's coming from a very credible brand like Starbucks, I think it's a great way to educate the consumer as well, right? So a brilliant one. Akshay?
Yeah, we did a campaign for Flipkart very recently. And why I'm taking Flipkart is that the notion is that AR is mostly all upper funnel and, these commerce companies would never do that. But, it was a great campaign. It's a case study. Very recently, they had this campaign on Flip Girl, right? Which, if you remember, Alia Bhatt was their ambassador, right? And what their brand promise that they were trying to push was around great products or the variety of products, the speed of delivery and pricing. These were three brand promises that they wanted to bring out there. And we had to execute an AR lens on Snapchat, right? Keeping this in mind, keeping in mind that, hey, it's Flipkart, which is obviously looking at lower funnel metrics and stuff like that. So what we did, again, we gamified, and they were wanting to reach out to Gen Zs, right? So we gamified the entire lens process. And what we said was, hey, while Alia Bhatt is there, we will not use Alia Bhatt, right? Because it's AR, you can also become a flip girl, right? Which means that when you look at the camera and yourself, it transforms you in how a flip girl is or how
you created
Alia Bhatt
aspiration.
We created that for them. And we gamified in a way that they could pick up discounts, as it was like a straight road and you're moving in that road and you could pick up discounts and stuff like that at speed. So all that, went through. And they reached out to, almost 24 million unique users across. Each of those on an average spent almost 15 seconds on that content. And what Flipkart eventually also did, it was not just a single, campaign that they did. They used those audiences, they captured them, and eventually used them for retargeting them to lower funnel. Because there was intent that was built, they knew the brand salience, the brand promise, etc. And now they, targeted them or retargeted them for lower funnel metrics, and they had a successful campaign doing that. So, yeah, I think it was one of the good ones.
Very, very interesting. Yash, do you have something to share on this?
So one of the campaigns that we had actually with virtual reality was involved in a local bar where we had a couple of people experience the setup. It was a virtual sim racing experience where people could actually get the feel of driving a racing simulator. So that was one of the experiences that we had set up, and we had seen a lot of interest was gouged by the Gen Zs at that point. However, we did also notice that there were a couple of issues when it came to, each person had a requirement of the size, for example, the helmet, the headset would not fit on a lot of people. So there's a lot of these things that we realized would make, in future iterations of different headsets a lot more easier to process, a lot more actively engaged with the new users. So you would have all these processes.
Very nice. I think campaigns are successful if they make the ROI sense for each brand. So what is the most effective way for you, I'll start with Deepa, to measure the ROI on your VR-specific campaigns?
Honestly, right now we are using it more for engagement and not ROI in the traditional sense of saying that it should translate into sales. Because a lot of stuff that brands, originally have done and must continue to do is not just look at ROI. ROI is the outcome, so you can't have everything based on ROI because then it becomes very functional as well. So my headspace is that use it selectively right now for engagement. Eventually it'll probably, become a little more evolved and we look at ROI when we do a lot of it, right? Because we're not doing that kind of volume right now. It's used for engagement.
So it's selective, it's limited, but it's very, very high quality.
That's
is the
right.
focus.
That's
and
right.
the focus would be personalization and engagement for the consumers.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Aruna, do you have any examples to give?
Yeah, so difficult to do it in another content space, but we did an interesting thing with Prime. Basically, I'm sure a lot of you would be members. I think we use this concept to really let potential users envision a life with Prime. So you think of you need something urgently, you get it delivered the same day. You want to you are in transit, Amazon Music is there for you. You want to get entertained after you're back from home, then Prime Video is there. I think, and if you want to read great books, then Prime Reading is there. And those aspects, I think we just built, ahead of Prime Day, we built this campaign out in terms of what would your life look like with Prime. And that is something, we saw a good level of engagement, and rightly said, this helps you imagine, but the next steps of what you call a typical mid and lower funnel of advertising can happen through other means.
Sure. So considering the global reach for many, many brands, and Akshay, we were engaging in a conversation regarding this, I'd start with you. How do you address cultural differences or preferences? Do you localize the VR experiences for this generation?
Absolutely. So I think AR is all about localization, customization. There's so much you can do, with AR. For example, if it is localized and you need to do customization, we have campaigns which we've run for cosmetics company, right? Where through skin tones, etc., you are able to customize what looks best for you. We did one campaign for Mama Earth. They were promoting their lipsticks, for example, and we had a variety of lipstick shades which were accurate because you have to be genuine and which would suit you as your profile and skin tone, etc. The other thing is, of course, when we do campaigns for brands who are looking at countries outside of India, right? That's a different ball game. So within India is different, but we've done campaigns for certain brands in Middle East, for example, and you have to be little culturally sensitive about those markets, how you're depicting women, for example, in advertisements, etc. So there is a lot that can be done when you're doing augmented reality, because it's a world which is a make-believe and a created world. So, of course, that goes.
I've been asked to wrap this up, and I have to announce that, but I will still take one more question, and then you'll have to give me few minutes for the audience to participate too, please. I will speak to Mr. Manwari, and I will speak to him backstage.
All right.
I'm not letting this go right now, so hold on. Very, very important for VR is the kind of challenges that we face, because if you look at affordability, you look at the logistics, availability, we were talking about the equipment that you require, right? I think it's very important to highlight the kind of challenges you'd face, each one of you, for your specific brands, and how do you plan to overcome those or plan for those? You'll start, Yash.
So what we've seen is like the biggest barrier that we've come across is is the pricing. Right now, I think the cheapest VR device is probably still about 25,000 rupees, which is still extremely high compared to a mobile entry point, which is somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 rupees. So automatically, you're cutting off that entire audience, which would afford a 5,000 to a 15,000 rupee device. They would probably go to a mobile first platform over the VR. VR is more, at this point, a luxury for a lot of the people. And I think once we're able to overcome the pricing, which should happen in some time, I think that is one of the biggest barriers. Along with that, FPS, portability, battery, all of these things are what's going to aid in increasing the average duration per session.
Sure. Deepa, anything to do with like the ethical points that we need to keep in mind, because it is personalizing and getting into a person's space as well from an AR perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ethical consideration is always going to be paramount, irrespective of AR, VR. But I think also from a business standpoint and a brand standpoint, it depends on what journey you are at and what's your AOP like, right, for the year. If you're going to be in a mode for very high customer acquisition and expansion, then you would put monies more around activities that give you that. And if you're a strong brand already, versus if you're a brand which is really trying to have that stickiness because competition is very close to you, then you would probably spend more of this, in terms of engagement. So I think that's another challenge when the economy is a little tough. One of the easiest things to let go of is the good to have, right? And unfortunately, it is in that space today. But I think as the market becomes more mature and, technology is making it more affordable, I think it will become very, very important going forward.
Interesting. And from a content perspective, it's anyway very hard.
I think we have to solve for challenges of scale rather than looking at it as a one-off activity. If you are able to, figure out the right level of production and to do it at scale, definitely would be super successful.
Yes. Akshay?
I think from ad tech perspective, the challenge lies, talking to advertisers and making them understand that don't force fit your regular communication into when you do something innovatively over here and when you're reaching out to Gen Zs. Getting assets, which are 3D assets, etc. Those are certain challenges which you tend to face when you're trying to do something into this space, which is offbeat, that we are also trying to solve for. Yeah.
Sure. I think we'll call it a day for our session. Thank you so much. Thank you. You've been amazing.
And thank you so much for taking the session so amazingly. And you're looking gorgeous. Thank you so much, all of you, for bringing out the best examples also and sharing your expertise and your thoughtful vision. May I request Ms. Parul to please felicitate all our speakers for the day, starting with Mr. Yash. And I request all of you to please put your hands together for all our experts. We're really glad to have you all here. Wow. These hampers look so beautiful, no?